Hello, Kedar.
Hey Santi, how are you?
Nice to have you with us. Thank you for your time.
No worries, most welcome. Glad to meet you all.
People are just connecting. Mitch, 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 Mitch.
Sir,
Do you have do you have a slide of the profile of our resource speaker?
I sent them out.
No,
You
no.
want me to project it?
Do you have a PowerPoint? I mean,
I'll project it, sir.
yes. Go ahead, please. Okay. And just keep it there for a while we're waiting for the others to introduce our resource speaker. Okay, I think we can start. We can start. Welcome all ACRA analysts and staff who are attending this, our second webinar for the year. Our topic for this afternoon is something ever so timely. If there is any topics that we need to know more about, it is about climate change and as it relates to our work as credit rating opinion makers. How does uh, climate climate change related risk get into and are made relevant to our credit opinions? The resource person we need for this topic and the resource speaker we have the privilege to listen to today is Mr. Kedar Deshpande. He is the director for ESG of CareEd's Advisory Research and Training Limited, or CART. This is again one of those specialized work units that CareEd's is, how shall I say it, multiplying for itself. But it is so helpful, particularly for people like us in Accra. So I have presented here in front of you, we have projected a slide, the personal profile of Kedar. But what I would like to just point out before we listen to him is he is so immersed in the whole range of ESG aspects. The whole range from assessment of risks, from developing frameworks, developing methodologies, managing data, process, and quality mechanisms, and well, even developing not just one but several frameworks customized according to the nature of the industry. So this is an area in which he continues to pursue studies. And thank you, Kedar, for giving us the time to share with you the knowledge that you have on such a broad topic. But to those who are in the group, may I encourage you to not just to listen, but after the presentation to ask questions, or perhaps even we can interrupt Kedar if our question cannot wait. Ask questions, be clarified, be engaged, and be involved more about this very important and still evolving animal, I call it, called climate change and related risks. So, Kedar, will you please take over and we shall start listening to your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy, for the brief introduction about me. So, good morning or good afternoon, whoever is sitting in their respective geographies. So, I myself, Kedar Deshpande. You have already gone through the introduction about me, so I will not uh, invest another time in introducing myself. So, Santi, do you want me to share the screen, or you already have the PPT which you will be
We,
sharing?
uh, we expect you to share the screen, Kedar, if you might.
Yes, I can do that. Let me just share my screen. Is my screen
Yes,
visible?
so nice. Very nice.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, the topic for today's discussion is going to be the impact of climate change on the credit risk assessment. As Santi has put it more clearly, that climate change is such a topic that in today's world, no one can afford of not looking of these aspects whenever they are making any investment decisions, business policies, strategies, and most important for the credit analysts to identify this risk. So keeping that idea in mind, so these are the some of the topics that I'll be covering in my presentation. So I'll be briefly talking about the role of credit rating agencies and how we are getting affected on the climate change. I will also talk about the impact of climate risk on the credit assessment, uh, how the different types of risks culminate into the overall financial impact for the companies. That is what I will be talking over here. I will also briefly cover on the challenges in factoring this climate risk in the current form. Then I will talk briefly on the framework to assess these climate risks and on some of the global practices, how the climate risks are currently being incorporated in the credit assessment globally, and of course the way forward for all of us. And uh, at any given point of time, if anyone has any questions, feel free to interrupt me, or if you want to park your questions towards end of the presentation, I'm happy to answer them as well. Let's have this discussion more interactive, so that there is immense knowledge that we both can share with each other. So the role of credit rating agencies, I think most of the people attending this must be knowing the core objective of the credit rating agencies. The first one is reducing the information asymmetry between investors, lenders on one side, while borrowers and issuers on the other side. The objective is to have transparent and fair information being disseminated to all the market stakeholders. The second most important part that credit rating agencies play is strengthening the operational framework of the central bank. It goes without saying that credit rating agencies play a pivotal role in defining the strength of the economy, as well as the central banks uses the credit rating signals to understand how the economy is building up, shaping up, and it also getting used as an input for the future strategies as well. And last but not the least, the core objective of credit assessment is identifying the credit worthiness for the borrower. Now, what are these climate change? Why the climate change is gaining importance? I think all the people who are attending this call in their personal capacity also, they must be facing the climate change related issues. So be it floods, hurricanes, droughts, heat, wildfires, all these things are affecting daily somewhere in the world, and the impact is being felt both at the economy level, at the personal level, and it has been estimated that the damages because of this climate impact is pegged at $1.2 trillion by 2050, while in Asia alone, these climate hazards have already damaged roughly around over $35 billion of economic impact, affecting nearly 50 million people already. So it goes without saying that climate change is going to shape the way we live on this planet, the way we take decisions, the way we act going forward in terms of mitigating this climate change risk. Now, talking about this risk, so this climate change risk can be broadly divided into two parts. One is your physical risk, and the other one is your transition risk. Physical risk is something everybody is facing in, day out, be it from the weather event, water-related events, or sea level rise, uh, and what all these shocks it gives that everybody is very much familiar because of these physical risks. And the impact that this physical risk is again very much visible and tangible, something like because of these physical damages to the properties, assets, there is a significant supply chain disruption and the labor impact as well. And both these things have the direct impact on the production capacities of the companies as well as the cash flows that are emanating from that. It also has a significant impact on the insurance industry as well. Because of this physical damage, the asset valuation goes downwards, and it significantly increases the cost for the insurance and the claim as well. So physical risk in terms plays a significant role, especially for the insurance industry when factoring climate change risk in their products. The second part is the transition risk, which is probably the most difficult part to identify. At the same time, while everybody is going through it, but probably the challenge is how to quantify, how to assess those things. So, what are these transition risks? So, this transition risk is coming from moving towards the low carbon economy, which might require you to change your processes, change your technology. There will be additional regulations, there will be additional disclosures, there will be policy changes. So to adopting of all these changes is what every economy is going through the transition risk. And what this transition risk brings to the corporates is increase in the R&D expenditure. It will increase the compliance costs for complying with the new regulations. It will also increase costs due to other output requirements like aligning with the carbon emission targets or managing your waste treatment and all. So these are all the effects of our transition risk. So when we segregate this climate change risk in the two parts, what are the things that we try to see in terms of having the impact on the credit assessment? So typically, if you see the credit assessment, general tendency is the time horizon of these assessments are relatively shorter than what the climate change risks are actually posed with. If you see most of the risks that I discussed in the previous slide, these are very much in the long run, while your credit assessment is more limited to the immediate credit worthiness of the borrower. So
Excuse me, can we enlarge the slide a little bit?
Okay, so this is actually already in the full screen mode.
Is that the full? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just my computer. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. So, so given the challenges in the time horizon of the credit assessment and the climate risk that we face, these are typically transition risks and physical risks which we spoke earlier, it also includes some of the opportunities for the companies. So be it entering to the new markets, be it developing new products and services, be it developing your resource efficiency. So all these things also brings the opportunity for the company to grow. And a very much example that globally there is a transition happening across automobile industry where things are moving more from the fossil fuel side to the more renewable energy. So there is a significant shift going into that industry as well. But that's just a one example. But every industry is going through this transition phase, and this transition phase also opens the opportunities for the companies as well. So when one needs to look at the company's credit assessment, these aspects of your transition risk, your physical risk, as well as opportunities attached with them needs to be incorporated in your risk assessment. And that requires very much a long-term horizon of risk assessment, which probably is not happening, or probably I can say it's very difficult at this stage because there are a lot of gray areas in terms of identifying this risk, identifying the impact and all. But if you really want to identify what is the delta that the climate risk assessment bringing to the credit assessment, the risk assessment part needs to be incorporated more from the long-term horizon perspective. Once you identify this risk part, the another important piece that one needs to understand is how do you quantify this risk into the financial impact. And to quantify this risk, you need better tools, you need data, you need consistent and confident, full of confidence of data. Again, those are some of the gray areas where entire industry is currently facing out. But for credit assessment, it is critical that you translate these long-term risks into the financial impactful risk for which you require a well-tested framework, tools, and data. And ultimately, this financial impact is going to have impact on your revenues, expenses, assets, or the capital side. So typically, if you see the industries like your steel, mining, cement, automobile, or energy and agriculture are having significant exposure to these climate change risks. But it doesn't mean that rest of the sectors are not impacted with this climate risk. There is a varying magnitude of risk that each and every sector today faces. While few sectors faces high magnitude of risk, and for few sectors it is low magnitude. But every sector in today's world is faced with these transition risks and physical risks, and also opportunities attached with them. So assessment of both these risks requires understanding of both short-term and long-term impact from the global climate-related issues and the policies. So what are those challenges in terms of factoring the climate risk? So the first and most important challenges is the disclosure standards. While when you are assessing the credit worthiness of the company, it is largely we are using the financial information, which is your cash flow, income statement, balance sheet, notes related to that, and some of the other tangible data as well. So there is very much maturity across the world in terms of disclosures of this financial information. Very much thanks to the regulators which have evolved over the last couple of decades, and it's because of the efforts of our regulators and the push from the investors. The financial disclosures has really matured a lot across industries. But when it comes to ESG disclosures, it is still evolving every year, and now you can see there's a plethora of ESG disclosure standards coming up globally. And given the regulations are also evolving, there are some areas in terms of what are those global standards that needs to be followed across the industries, across geographies. So that's the one area where the disclosure standards and methodology is something given this too much of the standards. So there is a confusion, or I would say a difficulty in understanding which standard to use, which methodology to use. And given every geography issuer is using different benchmark, it becomes difficult to compare these assessments as well. And the second part is the data availability. Again, it's related to your disclosure standards as well. Again, in terms of your data, there are concerns raised globally by the investors about the transparency and consistency of this data. They're raising questions about how much confident we are about the data that is getting reported globally. And that's why the practices like assurance and those are the areas which is gaining significant importance. But again, all these practices are still at a nascent stage, while at the developed market, it has come up pretty fast, but for the developing region, it is still coming up to the pace where it gives enough confidence for the investors in terms of data that is getting reported. So because of these two challenges, what is really impacting is that we are unable to factor these intangible risks. Right now, we are calling them as intangible because it's difficult to report these risks in a formal financial way. So because of this plethora of standards and the lack of confidence on the data, we are unable to factor these risks in our assessment. And that's why it calls for the acute need of developing a climate risk tool to enable effective assessment of this risk. Now, with these growing risks, there have been various efforts that has been put globally. Now, one of those efforts that have been taking a shape is the framework, which is called Assessing Sovereign Climate-Related Opportunities and Risks. Now, this framework is currently in the developing mode. Currently, is gone out for the consultation with most of the investors globally. But basically, this tool has been developed keeping the sovereign climate risk assessment in place. While the main objective of this framework is to identify the transition risk, which is going to play a significant role in the way country will move towards more sustainable economy. While ASCOR tool is a sovereign level tool, but this framework can be a good starting point as a guiding tool for the credit analyst in terms of how one should approach in determining the financial impact of this climate change risk. So what are those pillars that this ASCOR framework is trying to address? So the first pillar is the emission pathways. In this pillar, the ASCOR is trying to understand the more quantitative related data about the country level emissions, country level intensities, country level net zero targets, country level 2030 targets in terms of emissions. So all this information, they are trying to track more on the trajectory, how the country level economy is moving towards these emission pathways. The second part they are trying to address is through policies adoption mechanism. So one way you have reporting mechanism and one way you are having the governance mechanism. So governance in terms of having dedicated climate change policies, having dedicated plans to meet those climate risks, and having dedicated action plan in terms of transitioning from the formal or fossil fuel economy to more renewable based economy. And the third part, which is the most important, is identifying this financing requirement in terms of this addressing this climate risk and opportunity. So it asks questions about your financing mitigation plans, financing adoption plans, and opportunities of financing towards more sustainable economic, something like renewable energy potential, energy transitions, and all those. So these are the aspects that this ASCOR framework is trying to gain for the country level climate risk assessment. And the main objective is to provide a more transparent tool, and it should facilitate investors when they are investing in the sovereign bonds. So while this is all being developed at the sovereign level, we just thought if we can use this tool as a guiding factor in terms of how you can use it for your own credit assessment level. So while we discuss about the ASCOR three pillars, one is your emission trends and benchmark, second is your policies and adoption plan, and third is your opportunities to finance the transition. While the first two is something which has been developed at the sovereign level, uh, one needs to have a company level trends and disclosures which can align those activities more from the macroeconomic objectives. So for example, for the emerging markets, if the country is looking for the net zero, say 2050 or 2070, then one needs to identify what are the company's level targets to meet its own carbon neutrality or net zero related targets. It also needs to identify what are the company's medium term and long term targets. And it also should ask questions regarding to the policies and governance mechanism that company has built to monitor these transition aspects. And of course, for all these questions, one needs to have the data. And I believe with the significant push coming from the investors and the regulators globally, this data will evolve significantly in a much faster pace than what it has been over the last decade or so. So once you have these company level trends and disclosures in place, then it should facilitate a credit analysis to identify what are those transition risks and opportunities that company is facing. So be it about the new technologies or processes, or be it risk about uh, the complying with the new regulations, be it about developing new products and to expanding the new markets. So all these transition risk and opportunities can be measurable if and only if you have adequate data and company level trends and disclosures available with you. And once you identify this transition risk, then it comes the most important part is your financial impact. So all your financial or the financing challenges, be it about mitigating this transition aspects or mitigating the adoption tool or adopting the opportunities to finance the renewable part of your transition. So all these things can be clubbed under the financial impact. When all these things are available, then it should give our credit analysts enough information to identify what are those climate risk impacts that company will be going through over the next, I would say, at least 5 to 10 years in the period. As I said, for the adopting of climate risk assessment in the credit assessment, the horizon of the credit assessment needs to be in the long run. So in the long run, it could be 10 years, 20 years, or it could be beyond that. But in the current scenario, while it is difficult, as we said, given the challenges on the disclosures and the data which is available in the market, but as I said, the way disclosures are evolving because of the pressure from the investors and the regulator bodies, we expect things will evolve significantly over the next couple of years. That should help our credit analysts to build the long-term horizon in their credit assessment, factoring the climate risk assessment. So while this tool can be a guiding tool for our credit assessment, we also try to see what are some of the global practices that have been followed by some of the global rating agencies in the developed market. So in the developed market, recently, European Central Bank, the Eurosystem, has developed the analytical framework to assess the methodologies adopted by credit rating agencies on the climate change. So they developed the framework on the basis of 11 criteria to understand the granularity of climate-related disclosures in the credit rating process. So basically, their objective is to study how the credit rating agencies in the European market are factoring the climate risks. Even as I said, it's not only the Asia, but is Europe also at the same time facing humongous climate change related aspects. So European Central Bank recently conducted the assessment about how the credit rating agencies are factoring these climate change risks in their assessment. So the framework which they developed belong to these 11 criteria factor in those 5 pillars. Uh, if you're having difficulties in reading through this text, probably I can share this report after this call as well. But basically, the idea is they're trying to assess the companies in terms of disclosures that credit rating agencies are doing, be it about their methodologies, be it about their approach, or be it about their data and the impact on the credit assessment part. Now, on the basis of that, what have they found in terms of the assessment of this external credit assessment institution? The first on the approach to climate change risk assessment. The observation was most of the credit rating agencies had dedicated ESG risk assessment criteria. In terms of identifying this risk, they follow the exposure-based approach in determining sector and industry level exposure to this climate risk, which they calculate to the issuer level. And this assessment consists of the qualitative or quantitative assessment or the combination of both. While some credit rating agencies give more weightage more preference on the qualitative comments, but while few are having the combination of both on the basis of the maturity of the information that they have. On the second part, in terms of disclosure of this risk data and its impact on credit rating. So while these challenges that we spoke a while back, the similar challenges the global rating agencies are also facing about the data and transparency aspects. And because of that, currently credit rating agencies are not able to disclose the data used for assessing the climate risk assessment. At the same time, the magnitude of the adjustment stemming from the material climate change risk to credit rating is currently either not disclosed or only somewhat disclosed in their assessment. So both these challenges is something being faced globally across credit rating agencies. Of course, the magnitude of these challenges differs in terms of maturity of the data and the development of the ESG concepts as a whole. But currently, even the same challenges everybody is facing is how you can quantify these risks in terms of making a delta to your credit risk assessment. So while we have looked through all the pieces in terms of what are those climate risks, what are those different types of risks, how those risks has a significant role to play in terms of the financial impact and credit worthiness, as well as the framework and some of the global practices. Now, taking that into the consideration, what is the way forward, we believe? The way forward, it is imperative for all the credit rating agencies to factor physical and transition climate risk given the increasing magnitude and the exposure to these potential losses. So while today we we are not able to quantify these risks, but going forward, it is imperative that all credit rating agencies needs to evolve their methodologies to ensure that these risks are factored in the assessment. While the ASCOR framework is a sovereign level framework, but it can be used as a guiding tool to determine the transition risk and opportunities at the issuer level. And we also expect the credit rating agencies and regulators, they will continue to collaborate with each other to evolve the current tools and approaches to ensure the comparability of the climate risk assessment across credit risk agencies. So yeah, so this is what I had to cover in the today's presentation. I will leave the floor open for more questions and answers now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kedar. I will now open the floor to questions from anybody. Any questions on the presentation and even beyond the specific presentation, if it's related to climate change risks. So just raise your hands, or you just open up and ask your questions and address it together. Anybody? Or perhaps, are you still digesting the presentation? I'm still digesting myself. But Kedar, you talk about frameworks. And you say also that one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah.
But certainly, when you input risk considerations from climate change, they would really vary from industry to industry, particularly. And the more obvious, really, they say manufacturing, energy,
Correct.
supply chains, etc. How would you, therefore, this is, I don't know how to frame my own question, but shouldn't we have, therefore, some kind of a, at least per industry, some differentiated framework? And who will initiate that? Will it be the industry itself? Are they capable of doing that? Or will it have to be regulators?
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that question. So yes, let me just answer the first part of your question. So yes, every industry's exposure to this climate risk is different, as you rightly pointed out. So some industries like your materials, your consumer discretionary, supply chain, and all that, they are highly exposed to this risk. While some peers in your services industry or those probably are not heavily exposed to this climate risk. So it is important that you factor that exposure while evaluating your risk assessment. So the highly climate sensitive industries should attract higher exposure and higher risk assessment scores while you are factoring those risks in your financial assessment. In terms of developing the framework perspective, yes, especially on the ESG side, there are separate frameworks which have been developed for the different industry. And that is what the global practice from the ESG perspective as well, because it's not like one size fits for all. Every industry's ESG factors and its magnitudes are different. So one needs to have a different exposure factors for the different industry and to some extent different frameworks as well. In terms of who should be developing this framework, while the guiding principles can come from the regulatory side, but in terms of developing this framework, it needs to be undertaken by the individual credit rating agencies, because that's where the expertise of your skill and your experience will come into the play. While all credit rating agencies' methodologies should align with the regulators' guidelines and expectations, but individual sector level frameworks can be developed at the credit rating agencies level.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Anybody else has a question or questions? Christine,
Yeah, Miss Sandy.
how does
Yeah.
what comment can you share with us comparing what you are doing in China?
Actually, first, thank you for the presentation, which is very interesting. And also, I do have a question for Mr. Keda. So, I'm wondering if how we can balance the short-term impact and longer-term trend of the climate change risk on our credit assessment, because we know that, as you have mentioned, most of the climate change risk they are long-term. They have longer-term, impacts on the issuer. But for credit assessment, normally we will focus on the issuer's credit performance maybe in the next 12 to 18 months. And if you're talking about the short-term impacts, maybe most of them can be reflected in their financial data. So this is something we would like to discuss it with you. So how do you suggest maybe we can incorporate or we can balance the short-term and the long-term impacts of the climate change risk on our credit assessment?
Okay, comment, Kedar.
Yeah, I think that's the I think the challenge that probably most of the credit analysts might be having, and we are happy to collaborate with all like-minded analysts who are looking forward to develop a mechanism or develop a framework where it should guide you how you can identify the short-term and medium-term and long-term climate risk assessment. The first and most important part before one can step into that direction is having the adequate data, and the data which can be transparent, consistent, and probably I would say is more assured sort of data. Because that is where the area that currently investors are grappling with, that something called greenwashing, where there's a lot of commitments, that there's a lot of claims that has been made, but probably in reality that may not be the case. So before when we venture out in developing the frameworks and all, the basic that one needs to have in mind is the data, and that data needs to evolve to give enough confidence for our credit analysts to build framework on the basis of that. So yes, that is something work to do for all the analysts, and as well as it also calls for more collaboration with the regulators to push more hard. So probably I can just give one example how it is evolving in the Indian market. So recently, the Indian regulator came up with the mandate of reporting ESG disclosures for all leading listed companies in India. So they have come up with the framework. They have come up with the standard way of how one company should be reporting their ESG data and all that. While for the Indian corporates, it is still a probably initial stage of evolving these methodologies and reporting that. But I would say that is where the steps are moving, where regulators are pushing for the more and more transparent and consistent disclosures. But I think this is the way forward going ahead, that once we have the consistent and transparent data, that should be the base in terms of developing the medium and long-term horizon for the credit assessment.
Okay, thank you. Kedar, Miss Desta Barida is asking about slide 11, which is the criteria. Although we cannot read it, perhaps what we can do, Kedar, is can you go one by one anyway with this criteria? Because this is important. What are these 11 items here? Could you just read it for us and make a little bit of explanation? These 11
Sure.
criteria.
Sure. So the criteria or the framework on the basis of which the performance of the credit rating agencies have been evaluated in terms of their ability to factor climate risk. So this framework is broadly divided into 5 areas of disclosures. One is climate change risk methodologies and definition. It includes the definition and assessment of the individual climate change risk subcategories within environment, social, and the governance pillars, which includes linkages between sectoral and entity-specific consideration, like disclosures on the various categories under the environmental pillar. The second part is your climate change risk assessment models and the methods. It talks about or the credit rating, credit opinion report, or the relevant credit criteria, including whether there are qualitative or quantitative, whether the conducted entity or sector level, or their main inputs and the key assumptions. So basically, it's trying to identify how the methodologies have been transparent in terms of adopting this climate change risk and disclosing that as part of their models and method. The third part is the disclosure of this data and metrics. And that is where one of the observations that was found through this study, that while the disclosures and the transparency behind them is something sketchy, so not most of the credit rating agencies are able to disclose all the climate risk assessment related data which they have used in their credit assessment. So the way the evaluation took place is disclosure of this data and metrics used as an input for assessing the climate change risk in the credit opinion report, disclosures to the granularity to the asset level, as well as source of this data and the time horizon. So all these factors about your data is something is being inspected through this study. Then the fourth part is the assessment of the relevance and the materiality of this climate change risk. And the fifth part is your impact of climate change risk on the credit rating. Again, this is the area where they found the piece that while most of the credit rating assessment entities are factoring this climate change risk either qualitative or through quantitative methodologies, but at the same time, they are not being able to pinpoint a specific area how it is impacting the credit rating assessment. So it is more as a qualitative comment which is coming from their side, but they are still not able to inform how it is signaling the movement in your credit signal. So those are the 11 elements of these disclosures that on the basis of which this evaluation happen across credit rating agencies. So probably what I can do, I can share this report with Santi, and probably he can share it with all the audience. But I think this is a good exercise that a regulator in Europe has conducted, and something can be encouraged to be done in the emerging markets as well.
Des, do you have a follow-up comment or question? Des,
thank you very much, Mr. Dumlao. Thank you, Kendar, for the very informative presentation. Actually, I have a question. I I just would like to ask Kendar. I know that the assessment is really more on the impact of the particular company or project on the environment. But then I would like to ask if the assessment would also include the impact on the people living in the particular environment, like the ethnic tribes or the indigenous peoples. Because here in the Philippines, that's been an issue. Some projects have been delayed because not only of the environmental impact, but because of the impact on the indigenous peoples or the ethnic tribes living in that particular area. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's I would say a very a great question in terms of while we are talking about ESG, while we have spoke only on the E side, but it is S side, which is a social impact, is also critical to point out, because these are all these potential or intangible risks which are today difficult to I would say quantify. So it could be the potential impact on the social side, be it on the community or indigenous people, displacement of that of those communities. So those are the areas needs to be factored to some extent. And I think the history can clearly provide enough evidences how companies have faced significant fines, penalties, regulatory actions, and to some extent they face the diminishing valuation because of the reputation hit that these companies have received because of that. So these are the aspects are also equally important to evaluate, and that is all part of your transition risk. So transition risk is not only about the new product, new processes, but it is also getting aligned with the new regulations and new expectations that have been stemming up from the society and from the regulators as well. So yes, these are the risks that needs to be factored when we are making the long-term horizon impact as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions, please? Well, Kedar, I'd like to go to be a little more specific. When we talk about frameworks, my understanding is, of course, we have a framework really essentially for an analyst, a set of key questions he or she asks to conduct the analysis, to determine cause and effect relationships among events, among clusters of data. What would be the, let's say, what would be the key questions in a framework that seeks to analyze, on the one hand, a company that is engaged in power generation using fossil fuel at the moment, okay? What would be the key questions for the analyst to ask in order to input the climate change related risks? That is one company. And how different would be the questions if I were rating a solar power company? They are in the same industry, but probably the questions might be the same, and why? Could you use this as going to a little more detail about the analytical questions we should be asking, even within the same industry? Focus on energy.
Sure. So when you're talking about a thermal power sector company, some of the questions that one needs to analyze in terms of first thing, what are the company's plan in terms of moving towards the carbon neutrality? What are the plans about the companies, whether the company discloses those plans? What are the technological changes that the company is adopting more from the area of their strategies? And at the same time, what are the company's long-term plans in terms of changing the mix of the fuel it is using from conventional energy sources to more renewable energy sources. So what are those plans the company is talking about? And on the basis of that plans, the questions about the financing part is whether the company is factoring the financing opportunities from transitioning its operations, and what are those financing challenges that that company is facing. It also some of the questions should also try to be more in alignment with the macroeconomic objectives, whether the company's ESG objectives are in alignment with the country level ESG goals. So those are the questions we should be asking in our framework. It is more quantitative data about their emission trends, whether the company is regularly monitoring and reporting their emissions, their targets and the targets for the transitioning, and how the company is looking from the financing side. So these are some of the questions I would put for asking about the thermal power companies. But the company which is already in the renewable energy sector, so the more plans would be developing into the new market, expanding the company's renewable energy portfolio to the new markets. That's where my questions would largely be. Of course, the questions could also surrounding on the increasing the capacity on the company's current renewable energy generation, and on the basis of that, these opportunities, what is the currently financial plan that company has in terms of mitigating some of these opportunities that company oversees. So if you see, there are different sort of questions for thermal power company as against for the renewable, because for the renewable energy it is largely about opportunities, but at the same time I would also focus more on the social side as well, as one of our participants highlighted the social area as well. So when you put up the wind energy or solar panels in the plain area of your of any particular area, diversity is one of the areas that gets highly impacted. So I would put questions more about the diversity impact, whether the company has identified the diversity impact, what are the plans in mitigating those diversity related impacts, and it also should have questions about the community engagement, whether the company has plans to engage with the communities which could be getting displaced because of those renewable energy plants and all that. So some of those social sort of indicators I will also include in my framework. And lastly, from the governance part, the questions would also should revolve around the board level strategy in terms of ESG adoption, board level strategy in terms of aligning the ESG actions with the broader macroeconomic or the UN SDG goals. So those are the things we will look more from the governance side. So there will be some questions on the environmental side, some questions on the social, and some on the governance side as well.
Would you say, Kedar, that in the case, let's say, a solar manufacturing, a solar power company, that it is not so much transition risk as transition opportunities that we should factor in? Are there any transition risks really on the part of a solar company? Yes, putting up a lot of solar farms, let's say.
I think one of the probably transition risks for the solar is also the water management, because the water is one of the areas which has been significantly used as one of the input for building your solar or PV cells. So how company is utilizing these water resources more efficiently, the recycling of their water, what are their water sources, and all that. So those are the I would say more on the transition risk from the solar side. I would focus more on.
Okay, thank you. Some more questions from the floor. Well, okay, I have one more question, and I'd like to address this. I would like to have some answers from not just from Kedar, but also from John Jiangping and Christine from China, because I would like to ask about how the transition risks are happening, are evolving in the motor vehicle manufacturing industry in your countries, in India and China. You have, because you have the market, you have the manufacturing facilities there, and you have the electric vehicles coming and trying to get into the market. So there is a lot of competition going on there, and there's a lot of investment going on there, and there are transition risks, I suppose, for not just the manufacturing company itself, but those smaller companies which are supplying the manufacturing companies, let's say car accessories, etc. Could you tell us what's happening? What are the transition risks you can see, Kedar in India, what you can see, John Jinping and Christine in China? What are these transition risks you see? And could you share us how the companies are coping and how you might be addressing these transition risks if they came to you for rating? You can start, Kedar.
Okay, cool. So in terms of this transition risk for the automobile industry, I think that is something of pretty hot area currently because yes, the EV market is very much booming in India. Most of the automobile companies operating in India have already set their plans in terms of having significant portion of their production coming from the EV side over the next 5 to 7 years. So most of the manufacturing companies have stepped up their manufacturing operations more from the EV side. In terms of the supply chain, yes, there is a significant push to incorporate ESG on the supply chain as well. And for this, again, there are two aspects. So one is the regulatory push. So as I just said, on the BRSR or the ESG reporting tool that Indian regulators have currently made the mandate. So in that ESG rating tool, they have also mandated about the supply chain part and their ESG alignment. So there is a push from the regulators that the ESG is not only imbibed at the parent or the OEM level, but also at the supply chain level as well. And we see a significant traction happening in the Indian market from the medium to small scale companies, which are the suppliers to this automobile industry. And this push is coming from regulators, this push is coming from investors and from the OEMs as well. So we are seeing a significant traction coming from these companies to identify the ESG challenges at their supply chain level and build the strategies, reporting, and monitoring mechanism at their supply chain level. So in terms of transitioning of this industry, there is a significant traction happening both at the OEM level and at the supply chain level as well.
Okay. Mr. John Jinping, would you like to share with us what's happening in China?
Okay. Good afternoon, Sandy and Mr.
afternoon.
Kedar. In China, we have played great importance to the transition risks. My company are developing the methodologies to put the climate risk assessment in the how to say in the framework of the credit rating. Right now, I have a question for Keda. What do you think the ASCO framework has implications for the assessment of the climate-related risks at the company level?
Uh-huh. I see. Okay. Are you still at it? Still continuing to develop? Are you done?
Perhaps half a year.
Okay. Well, thank you for that contribution. Christine, you want to add something?
Yeah, Ms. Sandy, actually, I'm not an expert on this industry, but you know what? From based on what I have seen, actually, this industry actually is seeing more opportunities. You know, in China, in terms of the transition risk, actually, it has brings more opportunities for the Chinese. You know, the EV makers. So you know that over the past few years, we have witnessed the rising of these Chinese EV makers in the global market, and actually that is mainly because of for the past few years, the Chinese government has been spend a lot of money, and also there've been a lot of policy support to encourage this industry, and also that has changed the supply chain also, because in the traditional car makers in China, we cannot compare with the global automakers. But with our great investment into the EV maker, this industry, actually this has almost changed the landscape of this market. This is what I have seen. So I'm thinking of this might bring more, in terms of the risk, this brings more opportunities for this market, and also across the whole supply chain in China. Yeah, this is only what I can see, because I'm not an expert on this industry.
I see. Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any more questions? Obviously, we can. Our conversation, of course, is not ended. I think what we need is we'll have another follow-through webinar, or even perhaps face-to-face, on how this topic is going to evolve and affect ourselves as we get more experience in addressing this physical risk and transition risk, particularly because the government, our governments and our regulators are so much a part of the risk, I say, because when they impose requirements for a rapid departure from fossil fuel to renewable energy, they create, in fact, the transition risks when they say you have to do this within this period. At the same time, we do not probably appreciate also, but it also creates opportunities. So a lot of government action is involved in making our assessment of climate change related risk. So, but anyway, thank you very much for this nice conversation led by Kedar. And I would like to, can we have a photo, a group photo? Can you open up? I'm looking at just letters. I cannot look at faces. Can we have, Mitch, can we have a photo of the group? Instead of just alphabet, I can see. Open your computers, please. Let's have a group photo. Everybody, Feng Xuan, Cory, Fatima, Bogie, Angel, Rongwood, John, Des.
Sir, it's VIS who should take the photo.
Huh?
VIS takes the photo. Let me contact Faisal first.
Okay, all right. Come on, open up show your faces, please. Hello, Pafindo. Okay, from Ram, do we have anybody from where else? We have from Pakra. Yes. Come on, open your, show your faces, please. We're going to have a photo. Yogi, Munwai, Aline, Isabella, Feng Zuhan, Yan Zhang, Yogi, Munwai, Yan Zhang, Aline,
Sir, I don't think we're ready to have a photo.
why?
Sorry. I haven't contacted VIS yet.
Can somebody anyway get our photo with our
Maybe from the team.
yeah, even from a cell phone. Okay. Okay, everybody open your Mitch, get one. I'll try to get one also. Hold on for a while.
We'll check with VIS. Maybe with the recording, they can take the photo. Or they have
Okay.
taken the photo already.
I'll take the photo anyway. Everybody. One more time. I'll get everybody. I have another frame. There. Hold on. One more time. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. John, hello. Bye-bye.